a really interesting thing about doing church in the VR space is that, for one thing, there's this idea of the digital confessional, where people are more willing to say something a little bit shocking or to share something that feels personal to them. So if someone struggles with depression, they're more willing to say, I struggle with depression. What does Jesus have to say about that? Right? If someone hates Christianity or has some major issue with the Bible, they're more apt to just straight up say it and then have a conversation about it than in real life where they wouldn't want to offend someone, because there's this separation of your digital characters that makes you feel safe. And so he's actually been able to use that for ministry, tapping into the realization that, man, all of these people who are in this space seem to be a lot more open to talking about spiritual things than if I just go out on the street and try to meet people.
You had mentioned one thing. You'd said everybody was really engaged. You gave like the two versions. There was that kind of psychedelic hallway where it just seemed like people
You mean
going,
VR chat?
Yeah, people were going nuts. Like I was like, what is happening? And then there was inside of a different space, which was like the church space that you were just describing, where it seemed like everybody was relatively calm and not doing wild things.
Yeah, I have a question on that along the same lines. Like so one thing that's become very normal now is church over Zoom. Like that's become very accepted. So like, just tell us about the engagement side with people relating to each other, because both of those are digital, but what are like the differences?
So first, let me start with the point of like, what did it look like to see people engaged in VR? And then I'll hop on the Zoom question and how it's different. So VR chat is one of the most notorious, like not just places within like video games, but it's within like the internet. It's one of the strangest places. Like if you ever want to have be really confused, just look up like VR chat videos on YouTube. And there's ones that like Travis is showing me that they're kind of shocking. Some of them you just don't watch, but like it's
Maybe
like
don't search
they'll have
that.
like hundreds of people will all put on the same avatar, and they'll show up and they'll only communicate with beeps and boops. So it's like 100 people just like beep, 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 boop, 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 boop. And you're like, what is happening? It's just super weird. So we went into that church expecting a whole bunch of, like trolls, like people running around screaming and yelling obscenity and just trying to disrupt the service. And that was what I was expecting. And we show up and there's like, Mr. Hot Dog and this like bunny and this like random like Minecraft characters all just there just listening. And then he'd be like, does anyone want to read this next passage? And this like little crab would crawl up and be like, yeah, I'll read it. So the gifts of the Holy Spirit are given to those who, oops, I messed up that part. And you're like, is this real? Like, what am I watching? So I think our point about these people being so engaged was just that we were expecting chaos, like, kindergarten age, like Sunday school kind of stuff going on. But it was just, people were really respectful. They were listening, other than Mr. Mushroom, who's just like staring off into the distance. But I think that part of the reason why I found people so engaged is that when you think about the forms of digital church that we started doing in COVID, there's two primary ones, right? There's like YouTube church, which is what most churches did, where you stream a church service and then people just write in the chat their questions, or mostly just like, hi, hello, everyone. And that's about the full extent of their social interaction, is they're just writing in a chat. The step up from that is when churches would kind of form like these smaller groups of Zoom watch groups, sort of, where people would all get on a Zoom together, they watch something, talk about it, more like house church style. The downside of that model, though, is that you still can't just turn to someone and talk to them. You can't show up early and just have a conversation with one person. You can't hang out later and hear more about someone's life. It's kind of more like being in a classroom setting, right? Where the second the classroom is over, everyone disappears. But inside of VR, both in VR chat and honestly in all three of the churches we visited, you could walk up to someone afterwards and be like, hey, how did you meet the Lord? And just have a conversation with someone. You're watching their hands move around, you're hearing them talk, and then you could walk up to somebody else, or maybe a group of two people, and talk to them about something. And I realized from hearing from Stunami, they've been able to use that fact to do real discipleship, because they're able to have much deeper, what feels like face-to-face interactions with people in small group settings than you would be able to on Zoom or, on like a YouTube live stream.